whether tomorrow is the best day, the worst day, the last day of any of our lives. And no matter what we are walking through, no matter where we are, we get to determine how we feel. A lot of stuff is out of our control in this world. There's so much that's happening that we have no control over, if we're honest. And we hate that thought in the Western world. We hate that we don't have control of it, but we don't. But what we have complete, total control over is now what? Is how we respond, how we move forward, how we think, how we remember, how we narrate the story of God showing up. We have complete and total control over that.
You know, we wonder, is God working in my life? Does he hear me? Is he near me? Is there any point to my suffering and any hope for change? Our guest today, Katherine Wolf, was living the American dream, an actress, model, wife, a new parent, and then nearly fatal brainstem stroke at age 26 upended her entire life, leaving her disabled. Yet from her suffering, she's realized the gifts and grace she's never thought possible, which she shares in this book of reflections that will help readers uncover hope hidden in the hurting. The name of the book is Treasures in the Dark, 90 Reflections on Finding Bright Hope Hidden in the Hurting. This is the book right here. Beautiful book, by the way, Katherine.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Kenkel, Fritz, and Friends podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little about your story and where all this is coming from.
Yeah, I was completely typically able-bodied with no health problems, quote unquote, no previous issues at all. And out of nowhere, as a 26-year-old, newlywed, I had a massive brainstem stroke and very nearly died. I had an AVM, it's called, which is an arterial venous malformation that was formed in my brain. And I believe it was formed when I was fearfully and wonderfully made in my mother's womb. And it grew and grew until I was 26, and then it ruptured out of nowhere and caused the massive brainstem stroke. And from having the stroke, it would take nearly 2 years to recover basic function and move out of hospitals and rehab settings, and then many more years to relearn everything, to fully eat, speak, walk, everything. And to this day, nearly 16 years since the stroke, I am still only partially able-bodied. I don't drive a car. I use walking devices or a wheelchair. Obviously, you're seeing my face is paralyzed on one side, and I definitely still have pretty significant deficits, but I'm highly living the dream to this day. I've gone on to have a new baby, and just enjoy so much of my life. I've written multiple books, and my husband and I founded a faith-based nonprofit called Hope Heals, and we have a camp for families with disabilities and have opened a coffee shop employing people with disabilities.
Oh, that's cool.
And we get to do just a lot of really cool advocacy work for people with disabilities on the inside and the outside, all types of just pain and suffering, which we all have, of course.
You know, there's a special place in my heart for what you just said there. My wife and I have a daughter. Her name is Abby Grace. She had cerebral palsy. She also was profoundly deaf. She had a visual impairment. And so when I hear of people doing stuff for people with disabilities, it's pretty amazing to me. One of the things that I did learn, and obviously that has held true for you after this, that brain injuries are very difficult. It's very hard to do certain things because I've noticed with her at least, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of concentration, and certain things she can only do for like 10 minutes and then she's gassed out. But you had to relearn how to do a ton of, I would assume that is very difficult for you to do all that.
It was very difficult. The absolute hardest thing was relearning to swallow food. I went 11 months on being fed through a tube in my stomach called a G tube.
Yep.
I was NPO, which means nothing per oral, which means not even ice, no water, nothing. So they fed me exclusively through a tube in my stomach, and it was extremely difficult to learn to swallow food again. And now it definitely isn't perfect. It's not like I can eat anything and swallow a lot at once. I basically have to take a bite of food and then swallow really hard and utilize all sorts of liquid, mainly sparkling because it's thicker liquids, to get food down. But it's returned, and I eat the cupcakes and the donuts and all the chocolate. So it works out just fine for me that I can't swallow lettuce very easily, because who wants to eat salad anyway?
No complaints
point.
there, huh?
Exactly.
That is so funny. Yeah, our daughter had a G tube as well, and so we're familiar with that. And unfortunately, we actually just recently, she passed away at the end of June here just this summer. So it's been a huge loss for our family, and took me a while just to even come back to work here.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I am shook. You've just lost your daughter.
Yeah, it's been hard. I'm just curious though.
I can't really imagine how hard it's been.
Oh.
Wow.
You know, I found out that we're in a new club.
Yes,
a lot of
you
listeners that had lost children have called in, and that was encouraging. I just want to know from you, what are a couple of important things your limitations have taught you about your faith or about yourself?
Goodness, well, I feel like I'm speaking to you in this moment, who may not
Well, I'll
have
take
the
it.
physical limitations, but who has known tremendous pain and suffering, and the deep limitations of grief. I can't imagine the trauma you've experienced. And I would say the title of that book is based on a beautiful passage of Isaiah 45:3, which says that he gives hidden treasure in the darkness, riches stored in secret places, so we may know that he is God, the God of Israel, the God who summons us by name. And I have to believe that in all of our tremendous trials and struggles and pain, that God has treasure for us in them that can only be found in the darkness of our lives and the sadness. And somehow God is allowing us an opportunity, when the time is right, which it may not be right for a long time, to learn the right lessons from the horrible suffering we've been through. Because the truth is, we might as well learn the right stuff and carry it through our lives, cherish it, because we're going through the darkness anyway, either way. So might as well get the good stuff when life is hell. I don't know if you can say that on this program, but I think burying a child is one of the things that would be as close to hell as I can imagine. So you just have my tremendous respect in this moment as someone who has suffered greatly.
You know,
And I'm sure everyone here has. I'm not ignoring you, Sally.
Oh,
you
yeah.
too.
you know what I've noticed is everyone goes through things. It's just not all the same stuff, but if you're not going through it right now, doesn't mean it's probably coming. You know, it's,
You're exactly right. The truth is, we're all going through stuff. It's not at the same time.
Right.
But we're all going through stuff.
Yeah. And you were talking about treasures. You know, the Bible talks about one thing that is encouraging to me and that does help is, you know, I know it was a financial thought, but it said, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I'm like, well, we have a treasure there now.
Yes.
And,
Right.
and I can't wait to be with her again. You know, I feel like one I'm trying to be as positive as I can. I mean, I'm being brave just being here, but I feel
You
like,
are vulnerable
yeah,
and so brave to be behind a mic. And you said
yeah,
you buried your daughter in June.
yes,
I
yeah,
mean, wow. Michael, right? Is your first name?
Mike, yeah,
Mike, Mike, you are a special human being. I have sat with numerous camp families who have buried children through the years. And it's nearly broken my heart just to see what the kind of person who has not only selflessly cared for a child with disabilities their whole life, but then had to bury that child. It's unbelievable. You and your wife must be the most amazing people.
They are. I can tell you,
thank you.
while he's taking a moment, they are the most amazing people. So inspirational. And, for such a time as this, we've all been brought together, and to have experienced their love for Abby Grace and to have been a part of that, and now a part of the healing as they wait to join her someday, is a true blessing. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Doesn't
well
make
done,
it okay.
Uncle Fritz.
Oh,
Well done.
but yeah.
No,
Well
Yeah.
doing,
no,
I
it's
should say. It's a process.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. It's a special process. We honored our campers who've lost children or spouses, or the adult is the one with disabilities, and the children are typically able. This summer we had a special memorial time to honor them, and there was something so healing about saying the name of the loved one who's passed and really speaking the name of the child or the parent, because I think one of our greatest fears is they won't be remembered. So let me take the moment and say, Abby Grace, what a blessing Abby Grace was to this world, and you will be with her again one day.
Yeah.
yes. That's what I look at it like each day that I'm alive is one day closer.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
you're
Yep.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Aging is actually this beautiful gift. I had this revelation a few years ago that every day we're aging, it's the youngest we'll ever be, which is worth celebrating. Our bodies work the best they will, but also we're the closest to heaven that we've ever been. And that is so worth celebrating.
Absolutely. I
Well
agree.
said. Well said.
Thank
Well,
you.
Catherine, you've been and are such an inspiration to us, as you can tell. And so I have to ask, when we think about grieving and life changes and the difficult days, what's the myth that you unintentionally grew up believing? And
Right.
how
Oh,
did it affect
absolutely.
your recovery initially? Because I think we do carry a lot of myths, if you will, not even realizing
Absolutely.
it until the hardship
Oh
comes.
gosh, there are many, but one that has really required a large amount of unpacking after turning 26 and having the massive stroke has been that a good life equals a life that is pain-free. And that could not be more of a lie. That is an idol in our world and a myth that is completely untrue. I'm dedicated to disrupting the myth that joy can only come from a pain-free life, because the reality is that's simply not true. There can be pain in a very, very good story that God is writing through your life. And honestly, I did kind of a deep dive on what the word good even means. I mean, as the Bible tells us in Psalm 84:11, no good thing has he withheld. How could that possibly be true? How could God withhold no good thing when we see people every day whose lives are ravaged with tremendous pain and suffering?
Yes.
And I did a bit of a deep dive on it and discovered a theologian from the 1600s named Sir Richard Baker, who wrote the following, and it really changed my life. He wrote that the good things of God, the truly good things of God, are not things at all. The truly good things are peace of conscience, joy in the Holy Spirit, the fruition of his presence in this life, and the assurance of his face in the next. Of these things, we can know God will never withhold, because they are nothing that this physical world could ever touch.
I think
And that is
the thing we miss is that those are the things that we easily let go of and forget. And God gave me a real blessing in that I was sick until I was 16 years old, sick and unable to go to school. My kidney was failing and I was in great pain. And what that did for me is exactly what you're describing. It changed my perspective at a very young age to think that life isn't about being comfortable, because I still found I'm a kid. So, what do kids do?
Right.
Especially if you don't know any different, that's the blessing. I didn't know any different than a life with pain. So you just find a way. And I have a memory that is such a blessing to me of watching my mom cook and thinking, not, I'll never be able to do that. No, I love this. This is a gift from the Lord. I'm looking at her thinking, how will I take care of my family when I hurt like this? And so I so appreciate what you're saying, because the perspective on life here on earth can either boost you in your view of heaven and where you're intentionally going and how you're going to spend your days till you get there, or it can rob you of your joy. And it kind of is up to us to allow God to work in and through those difficult days. And that's why when I heard your story, I was like, I have got to talk to her, because she has that perspective, Katherine.
Thank you.
Of not expecting everything to work just perfectly in order for me to be happy.
Right. You're exactly right. I like to say that we live and die on our expectations. And what we need to do is expect more of God and less of this world. And tragically, we do the opposite. We expect less of this world, or expect more of this world, and less of God to work in our midst. And it's a tragic way to live. I actually have a phrase I use a whole lot called the good hard. I love this notion of
the good hard.
The good hard. Life is both good and hard at the very same time. I actually have my own podcast called The Good Hard Story. I'm obsessed with it. The notion of good and hard are not mutually exclusive, that they coexist, and that's life. There's no one who's not scathed by our world. No one gets out unscathed. Everybody has pain and problems, even in really good stories. No one's life is perfect. I've spoken a lot over these last, probably 12 years, but speaking all over the country, a whole lot. And inevitably, I will ask, can you raise your hand if your life is perfect, please? And I've never had a single hand be raised in many years, in a decade at least. And no one's life is perfect. No one's life is without tremendous difficulty. And yet, some people end up having a really good life. And I like to tell my preschoolers, class at school, that our lives are like a book, like a children's book. There may be an ultimate happy ending, but there might be some hard parts in the story. There's a hard part in this story. And God's writing a beautiful story somehow, some way.
As I'm opening your book and realizing that your chapters are really just the story of your life, done in devotional style. And Mike, before I turn it back over to you, you write in here a line that I highlighted, and I was just like, yes, what is true in the light is still true in the dark.
Yes, absolutely. Powerful. Absolutely, because it is. All the things I believed before my stroke are true after. What's true in the light is still true in the dark.
I like that. That's good. I noticed you mentioned, before I can heal, I have to grieve what's been lost. And It's interesting when you talk about that. I've heard it said this, and we interviewed a couple recently that wrote some books for parents of special needs that, what we deal with is a living grief.
Right.
Because you're continually grieving what you've lost. And my wife has MS. She deals with the symptoms of that, and they keep bringing them up. So I don't know if the grief completely goes away. So how do you get through that, and how does the healing come after that?
Yeah, goodness. I think in our world, we do not want to grieve. We do not want to lament. We do not know how to feel shock and sadness and recognize we are experiencing trauma, and it's a real thing. And what we must do before we can ever get past any of that is recognize it, is pay attention to the grief we are feeling. We should. We're human beings, and we're hurting from various things in our lives. Because in order to ever move forward in our journey, we must grieve what's been lost in our journey, that we won't stay there in a place of shock and sadness and bewilderment at what's happened. But we have to allow our own story to break our heart before we can ever begin the process of healing. It's very clear in the Bible. There's a lot of lamenting happening. That's for a reason. To ever move past lament, we must start there.
I so appreciate that. I mean, I don't know if you found this to be true, Kenko Fritz, with what you've gone through with Abby Grace, but I find even me, your first reaction is to try to talk somebody out of grief. Tell them something pleasant. Tell them something hopeful. And
absolutely. And I do this. I so do that. Yes. It's our natural. We want to make things better. We want to put the Bible verse and slap this sticker that says it's going to be okay on everybody's pain, instead of truly sitting with people in their sadness.
Yes.
I say there is a deep ministry of presence and ministry of tears. And that's so much more needed in the moment than the ministry of truth. It's so important to have truth down the road. Absolutely. But in the moment of deep pain, the ministry of tears is profound. You don't want to feel alone.
Yeah. That's, I think that's something that we all, maybe it's a learning thing, how to truly grieve with those that grieve. The Bible said so. So,
Right.
But yeah, we want to shiny up everything. People have said encouraging things, but I think the ones that did mean the most is, man, I'm here with you.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. I just love you. I care about you. And this has got to be awful, and just presence of somebody. Not that they have to say anything at all,
Right. Yes, and sometimes less words are the best words. We should just be quiet. Don't try to put a lot of words around it. The pain is way too deep to, sum it up with some happy little bow you tie on something. No. I actually have a very special group of women. I call it the Suffering Club. And what we do is I have invited various women going through pretty deep pain to gather in my living room every other week. And the rules of the club, our bylaws, is we don't make it okay. We don't put a bow on it. We simply listen with our bodies. We are deeply empathetic, and we watch and listen and let people tell their stories, and don't make it okay at the end. We don't have prayer requests because we got way too much to pray for to sum it up into prayer requests. It's deep, horrible, ongoing stuff, and we let there be space for that.
I love that. I love that because it really reflects Job's friends before they fell away.
Yeah,
but initially,
you're right.
They sat on the ground with him for 7 days and said nothing after he lost his children and so much that he lost. And I try to keep that view in front of me when wanting so badly to say say the brilliant things, Sally. Say the comforting thing. You be the one to offer.
Right.
And yet, God said Job's friends sat with him and said nothing.
Well, and what I find is it's from a good place many times. You really want to take away pain and want to make it better for your loved ones that are going through hard things. And it's also nerves on their own part. I feel like a nervous desire to make the sad moment end. So I gotta, say some ridiculous, awkward sentiment about how everything's going to be fine. No, it's not. That's ludicrous. I mean, Kenko Fritz has buried a child. That would be utterly ridiculous for me to put any words around it other than I cannot imagine. It must be so horrific.
Were those the same friends that also said a lot of things to Job?
Yes. And then there was his wife.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
That came later.
Kinkle Fritz, I can
Very
count
true.
on you to take a good thought and turn it.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's still a great thought. I mean, they did the right thing. They did the wrong thing. So
Right. Very true. Very true.
Very, very true. So, I go ahead.
I was going to say we're talking with Katherine Wolf for those to catch people up that maybe joined in the middle of here. Treasures in the Dark, 90 Reflections on Finding Bright Hope Hidden in the Hurting is what we're talking about today.
Really your story that you have just poured into. And I'm fascinated because I think a lot of us have a story hidden in our lives and we don't know. How did you realize you had a story to tell?
It's interesting. I don't know that I realized it. It kind of just happened. I started sharing just about my journey and surviving the stroke. And I had a wonderful, just committed group of believers lifting me up. And I think one thing just kind of led to another is started volunteering to speak at MOPS groups where I live and Bible studies, and slowly but surely one thing just kind of led to another, and speaking more bigger places, and a publisher heard me speak and gave me the book deal, and I kind of didn't really ever set out to do it. It just honestly happened.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson in that, because I know that's entirely unrelatable, and people always ask me, how do you write a book or how do you speak about what happened? And I like to say that you're very available to do it, that you're willing to put words around it, that you are wanting to share and be someone who will volunteer to testify to what God has done, and being available to do that. And for most of us, I think it can be hard to access the story God's writing because we don't even really see what he's doing. But I would say spend your life doing that, knowing what God is doing in your story and crafting your entire life around being able to tell of what he's done in your life.
So powerful. One other thought. You call hope an escape hatch, and we're kind of dancing around that a little bit. But when we're in that what if loop,
Right.
what is the what if loop, and how does hope in God give us an out?
I love that you asked me that. I think the what ifs in all of our lives can be so paralyzing and terrorizing. Like, what if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? What if I would have married this person? What if I would have taken this job? And what if I would have done these medical things before? And for me, my pinnacle what if story is that I actually, in college, as a 20-year-old, went to the doctor because of dizziness. And he wrongly diagnosed me with vertigo and put me on medication. Now, had he done an MRI, had he ordered an MRI, he would have seen I had a mass growing on my brain. But he didn't. So what if he had? What if? What would that have meant? And I've come to a place where I realize that the question is all wrong. The what if doesn't matter. What matters is what is. What is in the story, not what if, what is. Because that's all we have is what is right in front of our nose. And I think specifically the what if loop in our lives. We just go around and around and around saying, and what if, and what if, and what if. And the escape hatch that you're referencing, I believe, is the way off, the off ramp to the what if loop is hope. Because hope gives us permission to live our actual lives right in front of us and know for some reason they are the lives we are supposed to live because we are living them.
That's powerful. And I think, too, the what if loop can keep us in regret as well, because we're still holding on to, I could have done something different, rather than saying God's in charge of all of this.
Yes, absolutely. I love that.
Interesting.
I think hope is truly a living force. Hope is not something we get once. Hope, because there's no quota on suffering this side of heaven, I believe. Yeah. So hope fuels us to go back in to the hurt of this world, all the hurts, the ongoing hurt. But hope fuels us to go into it with ongoing hope, the hope that will sustain us.
Wow. That's good. You know, when we're suffering, we naturally ask a lot of tough questions, and we just did.
Yeah.
But also, a lot of people can get into this. Well, who is God, and the problem of suffering, and why is he allowing this? And that can hit pretty hard. You have any suggestions for reframing that in a better perspective?
Reframing what exactly? Which thing?
Reframing okay, I'm going through this, God. Why have you allowed it? And who are you, God, through this suffering? Because you're questioning, why it's all happened, and why did God allow it to happen? How can we look at that differently?
Absolutely. Early on after my stroke, I can remember thinking God must have made a mistake here. There's no way this could be what he intended, what he has planned for my story. God messed up. And then I kind of woke up to the realization, and I think this is completely applicable to all situations, that if I was not supposed to be here, even in this broken body, I would not be here because it wouldn't have worked out this way. Like, God wants me here for a reason. So despite limitations, God sees me worthy of living a life in this state, or else it wouldn't be. Don't I trust him enough to know his plans are better than mine? And I can rest in that. And it's giving me permission to live the life right in front of me.
I never thought of it quite like that, because the funny thing is, we had a little bit of the what if loop too with our daughter, because it was really a bad doctor. A little bit similar to your situation where my wife had, it's not so much undiagnosed preeclampsia, but was completely untreated, and she should have been in bed rest for a significant amount of time. In fact, our son, by the way, my wife's OBGYN said, you know what, you shouldn't have any kids after my son was born. But we had a completely different doctor with him. And he's typical because they had her in the hospital when she should be. They had her on bed rest. They're in the hospital for over a month. They took our son out C-section when he should have been taken out. And so it's like we have an A-B here,
Right.
A didn't go well,
Yes.
B did go well. So it's really easy for me to get into the what ifs.
I'm
of
sure.
That. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I say all of that about the what if loop with such tenderness, because there is so much deep pain in any recognition of that loop even existing in our stories.
But I love how you said that. And our daughter was with us. She didn't die. So there's a reason. There's a reason why she was with us. And That's one of the things, and you've worked with a lot of people with disabilities, and she was nonverbal, but yet
Yes.
at her funeral, it was like an unveiling of how impactful her life was to so many
Oh,
different people. From a child that can't even say anything, she just sits with you and smiles or cries, and that's pretty much it. But yet, it was so impactful for so many people. And one of the things I did learn from her and from that whole thing is like the presence of who you are can be enough. You don't even have to talk.
absolutely. I, in seeing a whole lot of children who are nonverbal through these years, and several of them pass, including a dear friend's child, John Stone, last year, a 14-year-old with cerebral palsy and a number of issues who passed. He spoke much more. He spoke louder, with more clarity, and he spoke in a way that those of us who have words never will. Because your life speaks. Your life
Yep.
speaks so powerfully, and no doubt Abby Grace spoke louder than I ever will. And that's a gift. Being nonverbal, I cannot even imagine how hard that would be. Cannot. Or to be the parents of a nonverbal child, I cannot imagine. But there are such gifts in that, such profound gifts in that the life speaks way more than words ever could.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know. Are you familiar with who Toby Mac is?
Yes, of course.
So, he recently lost his son
Yes.
within the last couple of years. And I saw a video and he was talking about how he's not sure whether he'll ever be able to laugh as deeply as he once did, but he can smile. And he can still smile and he still laughs. And I'm just curious for you, the value of humor. And
Yeah.
I'm starting to laugh again. I'm starting to, but I still have that question because, it's just under the surface.
Right.
It's just right there. And I'm just curious for you, how has it made a difference in your life?
Oh, wow. Well, I do utilize a lot of humor. I want to laugh a lot. And my husband says I'm funnier now after the stroke. That there must have been some sort of valve released where I'm funnier now. Something, in the collateral gain of this, I got some funnier stuff. However, I will say that for me and for many who have suffered greatly, there is a low-grade sorrow that remains that I believe can be lifelong. That you don't ever get past what's happened. People say, "Well, move on." Well, that's not a thing. You never move on. You can, in time, move forward, but I believe you never move on from your tragedies, the trauma you've experienced. I think I will forever and always have low-grade sorrow at what's been lost. And if you're familiar with the David Crowder song where he says, "Earth has no sorrow that heaven won't heal." I've always been so struck by that, that we are on earth. There is sadness and pain, but one day it will not be so. One day every tear will be wiped away from our eyes.
I found out that the thought process of, you need to get over this and move on, like after a year even, you should be good by now. It's sort of a Western culture thing.
Yes.
And a lot of the world doesn't feel that way. I mean, in some cultures, it really was like back in the Bible, it talked about mourning clothes, where you literally change your clothes for an entire year that shows everybody of what you've been through or gone through. So I think you're onto something there.
I do too. I do. I really do too. I think that our world is so quick, the Western world at least, to want to get over things and push past. And there's such a wisdom to staying in those moments. They say one of the greatest human fears is to be alone, is to be fully left alone. so much of shame comes from that we think if people really know who we are, they'll leave. And so much of the staying has been such a theme I'm wrestling with. That is what God calls us to do, to stay and to feel and to process and not run.
You know, I really appreciate so much as I worked my way through your book, but I'm looking at the page will turn, because as we're talking about this, there is the reality that some of us think I can't any longer.
Right.
And so I'm going to read your own words back to you just because it blesses me. You said maybe you've decided you simply cannot handle your life any longer. And I read that sentence and I thought, oh, let's just close the book now. And then I just felt called to keep reading. And it said, maybe you're carrying emotional trauma you should never have to bear, or gritting your teeth through the physical pain that is certifiably impossible to stand. Every last one of us lives on some point of the suffering spectrum. And if your pain feels insignificant at a moment, one day it won't feel that way. We will be overwhelmed by suffering if we live long enough. If things don't seem bad today, hang on to my words, for they will one day. And I just thought, wow, you know, here's a person who isn't trying to talk me out of what I'm feeling, or who isn't looking at me and saying, well, your sister passed away 16 years ago. What in the world? Why are you still bringing her up? And here's a person who understands that sometimes I just think, wouldn't it just be easier to just go to heaven and not live in this pain and live without my sister? And yet you're right. God made me to do hard things in the good story he is writing for my life.
That's right. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I love the thought of, if we live long enough, everybody's going through the ringer.
Yep.
Everybody has a really, really hard pain and suffering in their story. You know, they say in disability spaces these days that if you live long enough, you won't be able-bodied anymore, that we are all temporarily able-bodied, that pretty much if you live long enough, you're going to be disabled in some way. Aging is real. And I find that to be so strangely comforting, that we're all at different places on that same spectrum, headed the same direction. And there is such peace in recognizing that. And there is a deep hope in that, that we can do this together. We're all dealing with this.
Yes, yes. Well, turning the corner just a little bit, you and your husband are keeping busy with your efforts to bring tangible, godly hope to people, obviously. And besides writing great books and speaking, what else do you two have going on?
Well, Jay and I have just opened, through our ministry, a coffee shop and retail shop called Mend, M-E-N-D, not mend. Some people think mend. No, mend, like mending the broken world, people. Gotcha. So we have a coffee shop in Atlanta called Mend, where if you're ever in town, come visit. It is universally designed. So ultimate accessibility friendly, because we believe true accessibility is hospitality, and true hospitality is accessibility. And so everything in the shop is to the nines accessible. We have tables that swivel up and down to meet the needs of different wheelchair users. We have an adult changing station for adults who need changing, diapering, toileting. We have cutout for ordering, where a wheelchair can order and be at their correct height. We have made tremendous accommodations for people with disabilities to be in the world, because the reality is many with disabilities are not in the world. You know, you think, oh, they're not at my church. Well, that's because they don't go to your church, because your church is not made for people with disabilities.
Oh, way to go.
Thank you. Has something to say about that.
Yeah.
Preach that.
I'm sure you do. And it has been a great teacher to be in this advocacy space, and in this disability space where I can't advocate, I should say, that my husband and I's eyes have been opened to the deep needs of folks within the disability community. And once you see, you cannot unsee just tragic reality for so many who cannot find community because of all of the obstacles, who are super isolated and alienated. And really, both of our camp and this coffee spot are designed to be spaces of belonging and belovedness for those affected with disability in the story. So I think that's one of the main things we are up to these days, in addition to raising our two sons who are now 16 and 9 years old. And, you know, the normal trials of parenthood are real, but we're doing great. And yeah, this third book of mine that I wrote with my husband's sister, Alex, on Treasures in the Dark, just released this spring. And we are really looking to just more of the good things that God has for us in this story. And we know it will be a good story because he only writes good stories, but we know it will be hard. There will always be hard things in the good story he's writing, but the truth is we can do hard things. We can do really, really hard things. Not because we're so awesome. No. Because God is at work in our story. And when we know Jesus, he is pulsing through our veins, and we can walk with him through hard things. And he will supply every need. It says in 2 Peter that his divine power has given us everything that we need for life and godliness. We've got it. We've got it inside of us. So Jay and I are loving this second chance life that I get to live.
Wow. I started to cry there when you described the coffee shop and everything that was, you know, I mean, to know that there is a place that anybody can get into.
Yes.
And that you can cater to somebody. You know, I often say this, people, you know, and I don't want to get political here. It's not that, but
Right.
Oh, the government has all these programs. Blah, 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 blah. Why doesn't the church just take care of? Because the church isn't. And
Right.
some churches are, and some churches aren't. But you know, if the church really would take care of the least of these, like we should, we wouldn't need government programs.
Right. And let's be real, it's not like all the government programs are just so amazing.
No, they're not.
Whoa.
The government program is barely enough to get you by, but it's still something. You know, it's something that's there. And
it's tragic. I believe, truly, it is a hole in the human fabric.
Yes.
And our job as believers is to mend. That's the name of the coffee shop, to mend. We are called to mend what is messed up, what is broken and not working in our world.
Yeah, I love that. That is beautiful. What, you know, before we let you go, is there something we missed, or what is there a thought that you would love to leave with us today?
Absolutely. Well, there are definitely a lot of thoughts in this head and heart always, but you know, I think probably the primary thought I would want to share with your listeners. The primary thought for you in this moment, Mike, and in all of our stories, is that we get to decide how we feel about the story that God is writing. Whether tomorrow is the best day, the worst day, the last day of any of our lives, and no matter what we are walking through, no matter where we are, we get to determine how we feel. A lot of stuff is out of our control in this world. There's so much that's happening that we have no control over, if we're honest. And we hate that thought in the Western world. We hate that we don't have control of it, but we don't. But what we have complete, total control over is now what? Is how we respond, how we move forward, how we think, how we remember, how we narrate the story of God showing up. We have complete and total control over that.
That's beautiful. You're right. We do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katherine. It's Treasures in the Dark, 90 Reflections on Finding Bright Hope Hidden in the Hurting. Wow, you're a you're a treasure. Thank you for everything. And man, I just want to go to the coffee shop now. I want to sit down and have a cup. Wow.
Come on, please come on. Yeah, it's in the heart of Buckhead in Atlanta. Come anytime. We'd love to have you.
Oh, neat.
Where
Love
can we
Atlanta.
find
It's a
you?
good town. Yeah, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Oh, everything is Hope Heals. HOPEHEALS. Hope Heals is all the socials, all the website. It's the first book, and it's Mend Coffee and Goods, MEND, Mend Coffee and Goods. The podcast, it's Good Hard Story Podcast. And the latest book is Treasures in the Dark. And it is super consumable little 3, 4, 5-minute reads each day to take you through hurting, hoping, and healing in the name of Jesus and all of our deep wounding this side of heaven.
Thank you, Katherine. Really appreciate your time.
Oh my goodness, what a blessing to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are very welcome.